ask for any comments or questions. If you want to come off mute or put a question in the chat box, please do. And I've got Catherine and Emily both watching the chat box and such. So if anyone needs, or if you can also raise your hand in your chat box as well. But so let's just go ahead and get started. So just kind of an overview of the way this quick hour-long session will work. So we're going to talk about like the case for teachers, why teachers, talking about why, or just understanding that transition. Is that a hard transition from a classroom in an elementary school or high school to connecting to the corporate world, and what is that like? And then we're going to share, some of us are going to share our stories, a little bit about our journey, and we're going to offer you recommendations for you to get started. And then just kind of tying it all together with what's next and how do you get going on your path. So, and let me just say that everybody, for everyone, it's a different path to where we're at. So, so here we go. So first of all, what is training? So when I was in the K-12 world, whether it was the classroom or working at the Educational Service Center here in Austin, we never talked about training. It was always professional development or staff development or professional learning. We never used that term training. So that's your first step here, is getting used to that terminology, that now it's in that arena, it's called training. So it's basically the same thing. It's a classroom of adults, or it's a virtual learning space of adults on the other side, just like in this session here. And you're delivering content just the same way that you would deliver content, or you would design a course, delivering content, and using a lot of the same instructional methodologies, just tailored to adults. So it can be, again, it can be classroom led. It can be delivered online, live online. It can be recorded, or you can just be putting together a course of materials and placing it into a learning management system. You're probably already doing that if many of you have made a quick leap into the remote learning space, and you're doing it. I know it might have been very hard these past 3 months to transition into a remote learning space, but it has not been easy for the adult training world either. So that's a little bit about what training is. And so why teachers? Well, teachers are probably the best at delivering content, delivering all kinds of different content in meaningful and engaging ways to sometimes a very difficult group of learners and a very diverse group of learners. And so just because, you know, you think of an adult training doesn't mean that everybody learns the same. Not everybody has the same attitude. They don't bring the same attitude to that training. And some of you may have had the opportunity to deliver training to adults, maybe in staff meetings, or you've had other opportunities, but it's the same. It feels like the same sometimes, and you're doing some of the same strategies that we'll discuss here in a minute. But so teachers, you know, they make great trainers. And I think that a lot of businesses are really beginning to think more about using teachers as trainers in this field. And a lot of trainers in the field or instructional designers will tell you they came from a classroom setting to begin with. So there are a lot of people out there. Sometimes it can be daunting to get in front of a hiring manager or a training manager who doesn't have that background. But anyway, so we're going to talk a little bit more about that transition. And it's not as easy as saying, hey, I'm a teacher, and this is this is my experience coming from a classroom and teaching kids. Now I want to jump into the corporate world. I guess my point here I'm trying to make is that you got to kind of shift your language some and start using some different language. And think of yourself and all of the skills that you have already, and why, and really capitalize on those skills, such as you guys, classroom teachers in that K-12 space, you really truly understand the importance of being prepared for a training or for a classroom setting, right? If you're not prepared, you know that the day just, or the class period just can go south quickly. Same thing in a corporate setting. So it's the ability to really prepare carefully. Teachers know how to adapt instruction on the fly and be flexible. And, oh, well, I don't have the handout, so I guess we'll do something else. Let's try to make this into a little game. We, have had that come up in the past too. So you guys are master teachers, classroom teachers are masters at that. You understand more than anybody the power of visuals and bringing real things into that classroom space, and just making things come alive instead of just standing up front and just verbally delivering it and putting words like this slide here. This slide's actually a bad example because it's not very visual, but I'm trying to make my points here. So, and stay on track, but you also are masters at managing classroom behaviors, and it's the same thing. We've been in training spaces in the past couple of years where we've had, 30 some odd attendees, for 5 days in the same hotel banquet room, and trying to keep them on track and trying to manage them all getting up and going to break at the same time and coming back into the room at the same time and getting them to be quiet and using some of those old clapping techniques, right? If you can hear me, clap twice. So I've seen that go down with some of my classroom teachers who are now trainers. So it works. So, and you guys have all day stamina. So I've seen that too, where, you're used to being on in front 7:30, 8 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. And so it's, but the thing is, the difference is that it's not, when you're training, you're not doing that 5 days a week, every week necessarily. So, but anyway, you know how to stand all day long. You know how to facilitate cooperative groups. And that's something that I haven't really seen a lot of adult trainers who have only done adult training really feel comfortable with. So we, with some of the trainings that I've led in the past, yeah, everybody stand up, 30 people in the room, stand up, and let's number off, and let's have this group over here with this, in front of this piece of chart paper. And so it's that comfort, that level of comfort, and knowing how to manage and get people up and going. When you're doing that with kids, it works the same way with adults, and they love it. And you understand the pitfalls of learning because you're adult learners too. So, and the other thing also is you understand the power of assessment data and the power of having kids reflect on their learning and bringing that into the adult learning space as well. So no one knows the power of data than teachers who've had to deal with a lot of TOS or STAR data and such. I don't know why I went to TOS. My head just went way back, but like STAR data or end of course data and all of that. So one more here. The lesson planning process. You guys are masters. K-12 teachers are masters at lesson planning. Almost every training, instructional design job out there is really dependent on and driven on an ADDIE model of lesson planning. And so I will tell you that I came into my journey here about in 2017 when I made that transition. And I will tell you, I'd never heard of ADDIE before. And so that threw me for a loop. And I was like, what? Oh my gosh, I'm going to have to take a course or whatever. And so once I read up, Googled it, did my own self-learning on ADDIE, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's lesson planning. We do that already. So A lot of these things that you start, as you start to begin your journey and you start to learn that language and lingo and other people, you start to realize very quickly that, oh my gosh, I've been doing all of this all along. So it's a matter of taking these behaviors and these things that you already do and understanding them and how that actually does play well for you and what it looks like in an adult learning environment, in both remote and instructor-led in the classroom trainings. So any questions or comments so far? Okay.
I think people have seen in the group chat that the PowerPoint can be shared via email. So you don't need to be taking, you know, rapid
Good point. Yes.
Notes.
Absolutely.
Okay.
All right. So one question you might be asking a lot, I know I did. So what do businesses want? What do corporations want, or enterprises? And I use this image here because I know that it can feel, or it can appear to be very big and large and daunting and high rises and very clinical. It's not always that way at all. So it's not like working downtown or in some big building necessarily. But what do businesses want? So in my opinion, from what I've seen, and of course anybody else can chime in from our session here. So I see that they want two things. So they want trainers who can deliver content to their staff, to their departments, or to their groups. They want the second thing they want are instructional designers who can design engaging courses. And they want that delivered, right, in meaningful ways. And they want their staff they want it designed and delivered efficiently. So they want that learning to be sticky, and they want changes made based on, you know, that there's change. Businesses are constantly going through changes, new software that they're trying to implement, new behavioral changes, new management, new structures. And so that all comes about through training, and they want it done quickly, efficiently, and cost effective. So businesses, enterprises, small businesses use training quite a bit. So again, it's not all daunting, and it's very warm and fun in my experience. So I've seen a lot of trainings have been very enjoyable. So, okay, shifting your mindset here. So instead of teaching and professional development, start thinking in terms of training and instructional design. And instructional design doesn't always mean like you have to like design pictures and graphics and such. A lot of those things are assets. They're already kind of designed for you, and you can just pick and choose those. So you're designing instruction when you're laying out your lesson plans for the semester or for the year, and you're making decisions. You're designing instruction, making decisions based on content you know that you have to deliver for that semester. Am I gonna wrap this up in a PowerPoint and deliver it that way? And then with my PowerPoint, you're making decisions. Now, do I want my PowerPoints to be very visual, or do I want to put a bunch of text on there and so that my students can sit and jot down those notes? So it's all kinds of instructional design kind of captures a lot of what you already do. And then training, again, is just taking that, someone else, perhaps their instructional design, and delivering that in an adult space. Pedagogy versus andragogy. Pedagogy is what we learned of when we were doing our teacher training courses in college, right? So we got a lot of pedagogy, and now it's adult, so it's andragogy. So there's a lot of crossover there. I have seen it written by some people where they're very, very separate, but I see a lot of similarities. I've seen a lot of adults who still struggle with learning. They don't know how to learn. They have, there are some accessibility issues that they have that are not well addressed in trainings. They have difficulty holding attention or reading technical materials. And so, you know, you still deal with a lot of reading instruction at times, and comprehension of materials or comprehension of ideas so that you're trying to, or content that you're trying to deliver. So, and then mindset shifting, that lesson planning is an ADDIE model. And ADDIE is an acronym, and ADDIE stands for, one of the very first things that you do when you sit down to start lesson planning. You analyze, okay, what's my content? What do I need to deliver? And who's my audience? How much time do I have? Oh, this unit, this health unit can only be 2 weeks long. So you're making all of those analytical discoveries and decision making. And so then you set forth to design. So now you start to kind of put it together and decide how you want to structure it. And then the second D, once you've got that outlined, you develop. You start pulling it all together, all of the assets and all of the materials, and defining those instructional strategies that you're planning to use. And then the I in ADDIE, then you implement. You get up and you deliver it. Or you put it in your learning management system for your students to log in and go through and watch this YouTube video and then respond. And so that you're implementing. And as you're implementing, you start making, you know, some adjustments perhaps in that process. And then what's the last thing that you do? Anyone know what E might stand for? If you want to put that in chat and see if anyone gets it. What's the last thing you do at the end of a training or a course? What might you do? How are we doing there?
Oh, we got lots of answers. Evaluate, evaluate, evaluate.
Yep, that's right. So that's ADDIE. So you analyze, you design, you develop, you implement, and you evaluate. And a lot of times you go back and you redesign and you develop again. So lesson planning, you guys are awesome. You guys do that all the time already. You're instructional designers. Okay, moving right along. Thank you for that. So this slide, just some other connections and why teachers from the K-12 space and higher ed make such great trainers in businesses and instructional designers for corporations. It's classroom management. It's knowing how to engage non-traditional learners. These are skills that are that businesses are looking for, right? They need people who can engage non-traditional learners, their workers, their employees, their staff members. There's a lot of employees who are global, and so it becomes kind of an ESL issue where you need someone who can deliver and use their English as a second language instructional strategies in the adult space. I'm going to say too, because I see you're shaking your head, those of you coming from a special ed background and understand all of the those types of needs, you have students with other needs, like students with disabilities and on 504 plans, and students in gifted ed. So these are all kinds of diverse learners. Again, understanding testing data and being comfortable with assessment data and liking it. The other thing is, going back to kind of engaging non-traditional learners, is that ability to differentiate in different ways. So that whole concept of differentiation and why that's so important when you're designing instruction, and also while you're up in front and you're delivering, being able to differentiate and make quick adjustments as needed. The other one is change management. here. So understanding what change management, that's usually a term reserved for that learning, the adult learning space, or in corporations or large enterprises. But you do it all the time. Your job in the classroom is you're trying to get buy-in from your end users, your stakeholders. You're trying to get buy-in on subject matter from your students in your classroom, or you're trying to gain buy-in from your administrators for certain materials, perhaps, or certain initiatives you want to try. Buy-in from stakeholders such as parents is a biggie, or community. So you guys teachers are constantly dealing with a variety of different end users and stakeholders. So when you're in an interview and a business enterprise asks you about stakeholder management and how do you manage stakeholders, well, that's what you go to. How have you managed irritated, annoyed parents, or the umbrella parents, or difficult administrators, or your department? And students as well. So those are all end users or stakeholders. Sales, you're always selling, aren't you? So teachers are constantly having to sell. That's that background building and that engaging set that you do when you start to introduce a new unit or a chapter. You got to sell it. So there's a lot of sales involved there. The other one is LMS administration. So a lot of business enterprises are looking for people who can work within an LMS, which you guys are going to have to help me here. If you could put in chat some examples of LMSs that you are using, such as, I think Canvas is one. Blend, I think my kids in Austin ISD have used Blend, Moodle. So there are a lot of other ones out there in the public ed K-12 space.
Yes, we're seeing Canvas, Blackboard, Moodle, Totara, LearnDash, Gaggle.
Yes, yeah. So do you know how to put content into an LMS? Well, yes. So they need someone who can be an LMS administrator or who can manage within an LMS. So building content online, and you've certainly had to do that quite a bit. You've been immersed in that lately. So gotta watch my time here. So again, and don't try to copy any of this down because this is part of the handout here, but I just want you to take a glimpse here, just kind of skim this. So this is a learning and development lingo crosswalk that I've kind of thrown together myself with a feedback from a few others. So if you're looking at this, what's the lingo? The K-12 learning environment. Well, a classroom in a K-12 learning environment, in a corporate enterprise learning environment, it's a classroom. And then a teacher, well, those are your training specialists. So you can see kind of where you want to begin as you begin this process of transitioning to outside of the K-12 job market and trying to get into and break into the corporate market, is changing your vocabulary and starting to really bathe and immerse yourself in the language of adult learning and business corporate enterprise learning in those environments. And so that when you see this lingo, this vocabulary in job descriptors, or you hear it in an interview, you know where to go, like stakeholders. I mentioned that before. What are stakeholders? Well, you deal with them all of the time. Trainees, attendees, employees, well, those are your students. I know a lot of you call them scholars. What is onboarding? Well, that's like new teacher orientation. So have you done have you created any trainings for onboarding? Well, yes, I helped my campus administrator put together, new teacher orientation for our campus or the school district. So first week of school, what are you doing? You're doing a lot of needs analysis with your new students that you have. So Here's another one that was new to me, job aids. What the heck was a job aid? So, oh yes, well, they're handouts that you pass out to kids. They're anchor charts, index cards. And then like, oh my gosh, you know, how many of those did I draw or create? You're a master, a lot of you are masters at creating job aids. That's what they're called in the workspace. SMEs is another one. This one right here, subject matter experts. Those are people who who know a lot. They're subject matter experts on a certain subject area or area of the business. And so when you have developers of a software, and I deal with SMEs a lot right now, developers of a software who are creating new functions in the software that a large group of users are using, I have to meet with them and understand their functionality so I can take that and write that into material that makes it comprehensible for my end users who are clinic staff workers. So that's working with SMEs, but you already do that, perhaps working with department chairs or administrative personnel or vendors and consultants who come in. And so, but just know that, don't feel, you know, maybe that one's hard to define, but just know what that they're talking about when you're approached with that. How would you, you know, work with SMEs? That can be very difficult. Anyway, so another one is project management. That's another area. And so I've added a lot of project management terminology to the handout that you'll get. So it just didn't fit on this slide. But anyway, I'm going to move on. And as I move on, anyone else have any questions or comments? Let's look at some more buzzwords as we transition here. But go ahead, if I'll pause for a second as you look at this.
I just wanted to make a comment about project planning. I think that almost everyone has been responsible for creating projects. And if you get a job in learning and development, you're going to have one project after another. And so, and you may be juggling 5 or 6 different projects at a time. And so in order to go into an interview, what you need to think about are, you know, ways that you can kind of divide up your teaching world into, well, I created this and then it was implemented. So that was a project. And so you are project managers and just probably haven't called yourself that in the past.
That's right. Yeah. And so that's another great one, about an industry buzzword, Catherine, that really should be up here is project management. And just, you know, that's something, that's a term you want to grab and Google that, search that, or do an introductory course to what is project management. So you begin to start making those connections. I already do all of that. So maybe some of you have participated in special projects outside of the classroom in your school districts where you've helped to develop summer school curriculum, or you've been part of certain initiatives that had a start time, a start and an end time. So, gosh, planning kindergarten graduation, you know, or helping with senior graduation, you know, those things are like little smaller projects, but they have, you know, planning that takes place, there's implementation, there's evaluating after you're done with the project and such. So these are some industry buzzwords here. Hopefully you've had a chance to kind of look at them and jot some down, but these are things to become familiar with, or terminology and buzzwords to become familiar with. My colleague here, Jessica, pointed one out and said, hey, you're missing a biggie here. And you're like, and I told her, you're right. So the one that's missing here that you really all should write down is in the learning and development arena and talent development is accessibility. And so that's a biggie. Designing instruction for people who need additional accessibility strategies. And I'm going to say this again because I'm I'm guilty of this and not really focusing on that when I design instruction or deliver, and paying attention to accessibility. That's a big one. So there's also what I wanted to just say here is there's a resource that Jessica gave me. It's a blog that you all, it's on the handout that you'll get. But I suggest you go into that blog for MicroAssist and read about accessibility. So there's a lot of, you'll find a lot of connections there too. And so that might be a great way that you can leverage yourself if you're coming from that special ed certification, you know, or that you're the dyslexia person on campus and such. So real quickly, just short, any questions or comments? Okay, so let's go ahead and quickly go through our panel, our small panel here. And we're just gonna, I'm gonna start off and then I'm gonna hand this over to Lauren and then Jessica. And we're just gonna quickly just share just a little bit about our journey so you know where we are coming from and how we briefly got there, and then a couple of recommendations. So I'll just start off by sharing that my journey. So my journey into training team leadership. And mind you, let me just say today, I don't have a team underneath me because our project has ended. So I'm it really more or less in transition right now. So, but I started my career in the K-12 bilingual classroom as a 3rd grade bilingual teacher. And so that's where I found my love. And I carried that, those skills and that love and passion for bilingual education to the Educational Service Center here in Austin, working with Region 13 and working with a lot of teachers, a lot of working with the Texas Education Agency and having to create our own trainings and professional development offerings at the Service Center for teachers. Oops. And then going also out to school districts into the area and delivering a lot of professional development, a lot of consulting on bilingual ESL program improvement and such. And so when I was at the Service Center, I also came into touch with a lot of who I hated at the beginning, the vendors. And so your textbook vendors. And building some relationships with textbook vendors, I highly recommend. I don't have that on the next slide, but if you're looking to try to make friends, oh, it's the next one, yeah. So making friends with your vendors who are there, who come in and do that annoying professional development, get you to use their product, their materials, their software, whatever. Well, they love it. They love to use you as models, and they will oftentimes bring you in then later on when they really build that relationship with you to come in and do some trainings. And so so I did some independent consulting after the Service Center because I wanted to raise my infant daughters as well. So I did some consulting here and there. And then I never went back to the Service Center or the classroom. I went to the dark side and started working for vendors in training and implementation, account management with schools, teachers, and admin. And so my last gig was with Achieve 3000. I was an implementation account manager working the Central Texas area and the whole state of Arkansas, and I was doing a whole lot of traveling. But my core was the Austin School District. And so as the renewals from schools became less and less, they cut me loose. So March 2017, I was without a job and said, okay, I'm gonna really start to research this world of corporate learning. And when it was sometime during that first month of being laid off that I tripped across ATD Austin. And so I will tell you, and that's part of my recommendation is networking with ATD Austin. So not only did I really maximize what I had on LinkedIn and joining LinkedIn Learning, which is one of my big recommendations, is that you start your learning journey there, but also networking. And I started to discover that, oh, well, training is professional development. I've already been doing that. So how do I leverage that? So because if my resume says professional development, the problem was it says professional development. It wasn't saying training. And so a lot of hiring managers were looking for those special keywords, training. Well, that's what I had to do to my resume finally. I said, well, I didn't do professional development for teachers. I did training. So that's what those kinds of things caught, their eye, I think. And so I had to learn that language and terminology and really begin to bathe myself in that through networking and just digging into learning. I recommend taking advantage of educator discounts with different software and learning different tools, whether it's Microsoft Office Suite on your own, or maybe you already have that. I know a lot of you have experience with Google, Google Educator and such. So understand contracts. Contract work, you may find when you start out that, wait a minute, I'm looking for full-time. But actually what I did was, and that was my strategy, was I need full-time work. I did not realize the power of contracts, and short-term contracts actually do, in the long run, sometimes turn out to be long-term contracts. So I finally, after 4 months, did accept a W-2 short-term contract for for 18 months. And that was in July of 2017. And here I am still in the same contract. So, love recruiters. So hook up with recruiters who can help you. So I won't expand too much on that, but recruiters can be your friends and they can help you nail the jobs that you need. Customize your resume. Can't say that enough. So translate those teacher tasks on your resume to more administrative type lingo. And again, understand the language of L&D. So that's really what I have there. I'm going to go ahead in interest of time and jump in and let you get to know Lauren here. So Lauren is my colleague, the last contract, or the contract the last contract I've been on here. And so that's how we met. And I'm anxious to introduce you to one of the most awesome trainers that we had on that team. One of the most fun, loved to dance, loved to take a lot of this preschool strategies with our adult learners. It was awesome. So Lauren Shingleton, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Shannon, for that introduction. That was very kind. I do love to dance. I will not dance on the call today, but as far as classroom management, dancing is a good thing. So a little bit about my journey. I started out after college working in banking, and I just worked in a branch and was always interested in training and HR, and so worked in the bank for about 9 years. And over the 9 years, I was able to move from a store position into a training position, which then sort of evolved into a recruiting position, because my training position was a program manager, and eventually we stopped doing the training program at the bank that we were doing, and so I transitioned into recruiting. So at that point, the bank I worked for, some of you may remember, Washington Mutual Bank, they were bought out by Chase, and I was let go. So I was laid off, and I stayed home for a few years, raising my 3 daughters. And then I decided I wanted to get back to work, and I ended up teaching preschool. So I taught preschool at a private preschool for 5 years, and it was fun, and I absolutely loved it. But as the girls got older, and of course they require more money, the older they get, they want more things, want to do more things. It really it came a time for me to really try and transition back into a full-time position. And so I also began looking for a full-time job. I want the full-time job. I want the benefits. I want security. And because of my big break in being in the professional world, and then being in teaching, I wasn't getting a lot of bites on my resume. I did have had a couple. I went to a couple of interviews, and I hadn't had a seminar like this, so all of my language was still, the teaching language, and I just wasn't able to secure anything. And so I found a contract job, and the contract job was through LinkedIn. It wasn't working for LinkedIn, but that's how I found the job, was searching jobs on LinkedIn. So I'm a huge proponent of LinkedIn and LinkedIn Learning. But I found a contract job on LinkedIn, 18-month contract, same story as Shannon's, except after 18 months, I decided to leave that position, that contract, and take another contract position, which was a 6-month contract with Yeti Coolers. And after that 6-month contract was over, I took a position with Easy Corp, and this is a full-time position. I am now an LMS administrator and also manage some of our training programs, similar to what I did way back in the banking world. But I am working in a full-time position with Easy Corp after 2 years in contract positions. And so that's my journey. That's how I got to where I am today. I think that, so as far as my recommendations go, if you want to start popping that up there, Shannon, look for short-term projects to transition. I saw someone posted in chat, oftentimes contract positions do pay more than full-time positions. Sometimes you still get benefits with a contract position. Sometimes you don't, just depends. The 2 that I did didn't include benefits, but I made enough money to where I could really pay cash for the doctor during that time, different, insurance benefits. So, it's a good way to transition. And oftentimes if you just get a couple of things, under your belt on your resume, you can easily move into a full-time position. Practice interviewing. I mentioned that I had some failures when it came to interviewing when I was initially looking for a job. I didn't have the correct language. I didn't know what I was getting myself into. So use your resources, practice interviewing, practice with someone. I know most of us that are on this call as panelists would be happy to practice with you anytime. Meet with someone who can help you with your resume. Again, something that through this call, use some of the language. You're doing what a trainer is doing right now. You just need to get those buzzwords on your resume. And don't get discouraged. It can take some time, but just keep going. And if this is really what you want, there is something out there for you.
Thank you, Lauren. That was great. That was, and again, I had the pleasure of working with Lauren, and we had some fun times delivering trainings all over the state of Texas and New Mexico. So, yeah, any questions or comments for Lauren really quickly here before we move on to Jessica? Okay. So let me introduce you now to Jessica Worley. And so I know that she's probably going to mention it, but Lauren and I did this, we offered this session last year during spring break. And Jessica was someone who showed up at that session and was curious and looking to make this type of transition and wondered how to get started. And so she can talk to you about what she did with some of the stuff that she learned here, but Jessica was one of several people who really reached out to Lauren and I, and we kind of did a little coaching and such here and there. But anyway, it's fun now having Jessica on this side now, and as a colleague and someone to bounce ideas off of. So Jessica, take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Shannon. Thank you, guys. All right.
And happy birthday again.
Oh, thank you. I didn't tell Kevin. Anyway. Hello, everybody. My name is Jessica Worley, and like she said, I attended this class last year, and I was able to take everything that I learned and turn it around and be able to position in instructional design. So I was in the classroom for 3 years as an art educator, and then I jumped into instructional technology, which I did that for about 5 years. So doing that, I helped campuses transition into the digital learning space, and I created learning experiences for adult and student learners. But after about after those 5 years, I started hitting a wall. And before COVID, K-12 districts that I had experienced really didn't prioritize digital learning at the time, and I felt like I was constantly spinning my wheels. And K-12 also kind of lacked this overall organization that the business side really has. And so I kind of knew that I would be happier overall in a more structured and result-driven world. And so I started coming to this presentation and started thinking about how I can jump over to the professional side. And I was able to land my first contract. Sorry, my husband's talking, so I'm trying to verify that you can't hear him. I was able to land my first position in June of last year, and so I took a 3-month contract with Apple. At Apple, I designed the course materials for Apple's home and tech supports advisors for their training academy. This curriculum is used by all Apple advisors and translated into 6 languages, and I had the opportunity to redesign their very first lesson that all Apple advisors took on their very first day. And so it's kind of crazy to think that all these people are taking my training every day for this academy. And then, so after Apple, I knew that I wanted to look for a full-time position, and I kind of got an idea of like what it was that was important to me and what I really wanted in a full-time position. So I started looking, and I was able to take the things that I learned and really fine-tune that, and that's when I landed a position full-time with MicroAssist. And I've been an instructional designer there for about 6 months, and I really love it. So I'm an instructional designer, and I develop courses for federal agencies and industry-leading organizations. And I really love this job because it gives me everything I was looking for, and I was missing in education: the ability to create powerful learning experiences for all these different learners, the ability to use my strengths such as graphic design, and then be able to present at conferences like this and create in-person trainings for adults. So it just had that variety that I was really looking for. So some of the advice, am I going super fast for you? There you go. Some of my advice I have for you guys is to, like they've been saying over and over, learn that vocabulary. Business, people in the business side just don't know how to translate it, and it's your job to make that happen. So think about who you're interviewing with. What is your audience for whenever you're going to that interview? And be able to make those connections and use their vocabulary. The second piece of advice I have for you is your LinkedIn should be keyworded. To get really good keywords, start looking for your dream job and look at those keywords on there and use those words if you can in your resume. Then you just keep tweaking your resume and keep tweaking your LinkedIn until those recruiters come a knocking. And I'm totally serious. You just keep changing up your resume until you start getting those recruiters knocking. Before COVID, it was very common for me to get 1 to 10 emails a day from recruiters. After COVID, it's been about 1 to 5. So just keep tweaking your resume and changing things up until you start getting those recruiters, because they're out there hunting. So people tell you a lot of different things about recruiters, such as somebody told me to wait until, if you get an email from a recruiter, wait a couple of days until you reply, because then they'll offer you more money. But in my experience, I always went with the first person that contacted me because they actually had a connection with the hiring manager. For example, if you want a job at Apple, go talk to Bala at Volt, and I'll be happy to forward you his email. And he actually had a direct contact at Apple, and he had a hiring manager that he always worked with. So he was the first contractor to contact me, and he was able to get me into the door at Apple. Working at Apple gave me that experience. It also let me kind of focus in what I wanted. And so, apologize, I'm not sure if you can hear. Anyway, also I would try to get some experience to fill out your resume if you're not able to do those keywords. For example, if you have a friend who has a restaurant, make a free training for them that is talking about food safety, about customer service, about anything that you can think of. That'll start getting you some experience in creating things, put things on your resume, and be able to have something to talk about. And your friend will love you for it. Okay, my last piece of advice is to get out there and start learning. As instructional designers and trainers, you should be hungry to learn and to create. So LinkedIn Learning is awesome. There's lots of online learning classes, professional learning books, and webinars. One of the things that we had talked about was the MicroAssist blog. And so before I looked at MicroAssist, I jumped over and I was looking at their blog, and we're actually going to share this link with you, but let me see if I can just share my screen with you and show it to you really quick. Oh, if I do that, I'll stop sharing your screen. Is that okay, Shannon?
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay.
Do I need to stop sharing?
I think it'll just let me take over.
Yeah,
I just want to show you guys. Awesome. So this is the Training Manager's Guide to Accessible e-learning. And Kevin is actually on this call, and he wrote this in December. And it is great because you're going to be able to make all connections to what you're doing in the classroom and how you're helping those ELLs and those students with ADD and dyslexia. You're going to be able to take all of those skills and turn it around and help students of all abilities in the adult world. But let's see, there's all these resources here that are just great. And you're going to really get a lot of that, and you're going to be able to build those connections of how to talk to these training managers about accessibility. And I promise you, you will be golden, because I've gone to interviews in which I've talked about these things, and I was just miles in front of them just with my classroom training experience. So good. Again, Kevin wrote this article, and it's awesome. So I'm so excited to share it with you. All right, you guys, I knew we only had a couple of minutes to go, so I was fast and furious with my presentation.
Thank you, Jessica, and happy birthday again. And
yes, thank you.
So Lauren, Jessica, and I both came from an elementary district background, and came, in different ways. Now, we do have someone on the call, Emily Ely, who works with our organization. So Emily, you came from higher ed, right? Do you have anything to offer that's kind of any connections with higher ed coming into this journey?
Yeah, and I think actually Kevin maybe mentioned this a little bit in the chat. Yeah, so coming from higher ed, I started thinking about a career pivot to corporate about a year ago, and have done a lot of these things that Jessica and Lauren touched on. And so one was joining ATD and then taking on a director role to get truly immersed in this world, and then joining a lot of other networking organizations. So other ones are ATX HR Meetup, it's a meetup group, and then Hacking HR. And so I think the networking and talking to people is so huge, right, for any kind of career transition, because for several reasons, you're increasing your network, but you're also learning. So like I've tried to have so many conversations, like every webinar I've done, I try to connect with the people who have led the webinar and try to get them on the phone so that I can talk to them more about their world to give myself a message.
Yeah. These people become your friends. And so you're looking at something and you're like, what's a training manager, And so they're your peeps then. And so you can reach out and say, can you explain this to me and why this is such?
So. And just to like sort of clarify, because I think, okay, so thinking about, so from higher ed, little things like, you know, it took me a while to understand what corporate, what they mean by project management versus what people in higher ed mean by project management. So go to the PMI website, get really comfortable, and then you'll start to see the Project Management Institute website, and then you'll start to see the correlations. But also too, thinking about like anyone who's been a professor in higher ed, you have research obligations, right? And you have funding, which I think Kevin mentioned. So like if you've applied for grants, or even when I was a kindergarten teacher, I did action research studies, right? So those are studies. So you have data from the studies, but also like a lot of those pieces are project management pieces. And any kind of like, if you've done grants, you know how to write a budget, right? And so really thinking through all of that was really helpful. Something else too that I'm not sure if this was mentioned that was helpful for me was, you know, like the idea of and start learning. Absolutely, but what do you learn? There's so much to learn. And so what I started doing was looking at descriptions of interest and then looking at their minimum and preferred qualifications to see like what kinds of trainings and certifications are they looking for, and then sort of like what am I seeing commonly, and then I did start doing those trainings for myself. So that was something that was helpful too.
Good. Yeah, certainly. Hang on, let me see if I can. Okay. So thank you for sharing that, Emily. And yeah, so it's about, it's really looking at the job description. And one of the problems that I had in the past when I was looking for a job is looking at the job description and then I would get to that one little thing that I don't do that, or I'm not proficient in that. And then I would toss it to the side. And so one of the things I learned when I hooked up with ATD Austin and started coming to the career SIGs was in one of the presentations I learned that it's an 80-20%. You know, you're look to fit about 80% of the job description, and the 20% don't worry about. So once I kind of got into that mindset, I started to really cast my net a lot wider, and that really helped too. But customizing my resume, and it can feel kind of daunting, but it's a matter of, you know, taking that resume to somebody to find your mentors and there's people in the learning and development field and saying, look, you know, this is what I do, and how can I translate that and make this look more business enterprise looking? And so there's all kinds of people in ATD Austin that help do that. So
Shannon, I remember that when I was at this meeting with you last year, I brought you my resume after the training, and you took a pen and you're like, nope, don't need that. They don't know what that is. So don't be discouraged if half your resume gets scratched out. It's just you haven't found your right keywords.
I'm like, no. So yes, that's right. Yeah, and
I also wanted to add something. Men will typically apply for a job if they only have 70% of what they're asking for. And women, if they have like 95%, they'll go, oh no, I can't apply. So just get your courage up and go ahead and apply for jobs that you're almost right for.
yeah,
80% is a good
you never
number.
know, because there may be something about your resume and about your cover letter that, you know, let's talk to this person. Let's bring this person in. So
we have about 3 minutes left, and I'm wondering if anybody wanted to ask any questions. By the way, Shannon, thank you for putting up those 3 job boards. Those are my 3 favorites.
yeah, so just digging in when you're reviewing these job postings, so search training specialist, search instructional designer, learning and development, and so that's kind of where you want to start. So start looking at those job descriptors. Build your skills, get in front of adults, do presentations if it's staff development at school or it's something at your place of worship or community or wherever it is. Just get in front of adults. Master PowerPoint. That's a skill, a really great starting point is really understanding the power of PowerPoint. That is one that really underlies a lot of instructional design type authoring tools. Network, and this is a great place to begin that networking is ATD Austin. Emily mentioned ATX HR, which is human resources. So that's something too really quickly is understanding that learning and development can sometimes with a big corporation can be its own department, and sometimes it falls under HR. So sometimes it's separate from HR and sometimes it's built into the HR department. So the organization I've been a part of is not part of HR.
So there's a question here from someone asking if the panel would be willing to share their contact information. And I want to mention that your handout has the names of everyone, and we are inviting you to link with them on LinkedIn.
Yeah, and Michelle.
That's good practice to
Yes, and Michelle,
on LinkedIn.
one of the attendees reached out, and I accidentally on my phone while I think Lauren was talking, I did not accept, but then I submitted a request. So sorry about that, Michelle. Try again. So here's some other ways to build your skills. Join Toastmasters. Focus on business acumen, building that aspect of your skills, soft skills and such. Find a mentor or a set of mentors, and definitely join LinkedIn Learning. I think it's free. Well, it's a free trial for 30 days, and you can really capitalize on those LinkedIn Learning courses. Can't emphasize that enough. Understand your the adult learning knowledge space and arena. So don't forget about ADDIE. There's Kirkpatrick and those levels of assessment and evaluation to know about as a starting point. Know Maslow, Williams taxonomy. These are areas or people who get referenced in interviews sometimes. Carol Dweck with mindset, growth mindset, understanding design thinking, understanding blended learning. I know you guys already have talked a lot about it, blended learning in your school districts. So that's something that comes up in the corporate space. E-learning, of course. Know what micro-learning is and how to, you probably already do that if you just look it up and understand it and say, oh, I can give you some examples of how I've structured pieces of my e-learning for my students with remote learning into micro-learning little chunks. Know what ILT is. ILT is an acronym. It's instructor-led training. And VILT is what you've done for the past 3 months, virtual instructor-led training. So you'll see that a lot. Don't be daunted by those things. Look them up, ask what they mean. And there's just so much more to learn and capture. So I hope that's helped. Again, and then LinkedIn Learning, if you're on LinkedIn Learning or not, join a group. There's a group called Teaching to Training. A lot of teachers and a lot of trainers and instructional designers that are part of that group. And I see a lot of teachers who will ask questions, and they get a lot of responses back on that. So it's a very active group and it's very helpful. Instagram, if you have an Instagram account, follow Instructional Design or Instructional Designer. So I do those too. I follow those too. And so there's a lot that comes up. And so I think that what people will sometimes share with those hashtags, you look at what they share and you're like, oh my gosh, these little tidbits or nuggets of information, I already do that. So those things are kind of validating and help you understand that how well connected you are to the corporate training environment. And again, build your resume. I know we don't have a lot of time left, but you know, here's some connections that you can make or changes that I made with my resume. Instead of calling myself a tech proficient K-12 educator, when I changed that lingo to experienced trainer, that helped. My master's degree is in bilingual, bicultural curriculum and instruction. I changed that on my resume and said curriculum and instruction. That's where I would take my red pen and cross that out and say, Jessica, they don't know what this means, bilingual, bicultural education, mark it out. Same thing. No one cares about your teaching certification, which I thought was important, but I just said, I'm an educator in the instructor-led virtual training environments, or, so different ways that you can phrase things that this is what you do, this is what you know, this is what you're proficient in. But you just do it in a different language using different vocabulary. Same thing. So it's a journey, definitely, and it can be a sprint, it can be a marathon. It's up to you and how you want to design your journey, but we're here to help you along the way. And so we hope that we can connect with you. The handout that Catherine will send will have the lingo walk, the lingo crosswalk for you, as well as Emily's connection information, or just her name. I think I just listed our names, and how you can connect with us via LinkedIn. But also, some of us were very active with ATD Austin, the Austin chapter. Please go on and definitely support us. We have a conference. It's a virtual conference, and here's a great way to immerse yourself in this learning and networking. Is our annual conference is coming up in November, and this year, for the first time, we are going to offer a virtual conference. Unfortunately, it won't be on site. We've had to make changes, as everybody has had to do. So anybody have any questions or comments?
We just have a lot of thank yous in the chat box.
Oh,
and
thank you.
I think we're in great shape. And I just want to emphasize again, reach out to the panel on LinkedIn, because you'll be able to expand your LinkedIn connections, and through them get more into the learning and development space.
Yeah, definitely don't be afraid to reach out and say, hey, can we have virtual coffee, or can we meet up and just here's my resume, can you take a look at it, and what should I do, or how do you tell me a little bit more about your story. Definitely not just us, but you probably know folks who are corporate trainers or in instructional design, and sit with them and ask them, just tell me how you got to where learn about their journey, so that might help you tweak your journey somewhat. So
great. Thank you so much, Shannon, and thank you, Jessica and Lauren and everybody for attending. And we'll see you again in 2 months when we'll have another Career SIG for ATD. And please check out our website for other opportunities to get into this learning and development space. Thanks, everybody. And
good luck.
Please fill out the survey that I am including in the chat. We are really trying to design these sessions around you all and what you want to learn about and your needs. So I shortened it again. It won't take you longer than 2 minutes, but it would be incredibly helpful for us so that we can better help you to know how to guide these sessions. I'm going to include it again in the chat for good measure, but thank you so much for doing that. This was just so wonderful. Thanks, everyone.
okay, thank you,
Hi,
everyone.
Shannon, I had a quick question.
yes.
The very last slide that you shared, that was you changed the wording, how you, this one. Do you think you can share that somehow, or maybe,
Yeah,
or I can just take a picture, I guess.
Sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think so, Catherine. I'll put this together in a PDF that you can just send me. So,
All right.
Thank you. Thank you.
you bet. So,
Thanks, everybody, for being here.
yeah, thanks, Lauren. Thanks, Jessica. I think Jessica popped off. So, but yeah, I really appreciate you guys. And I know that you guys have become the masters at remote learning and e-learning. So definitely, there are a lot of businesses out there who are looking to try to shift. They made that shift really fast, I think, and they've made a lot of mistakes. And I think right now they're in cleanup mode, and let's take a step back and look at how we can make this better. Because what I've seen and heard is that a lot of businesses have just thrown content together really fast when they had to shut down. And it's not pretty. And so it's different than, instructor-led converting that over to e-learning is not the same. So just something to consider. And I think businesses are going to really be gearing up towards, you know, recruiting more people who have that e-learning experience. So that comfort of being, you know, in front of the camera and delivering online.
Thank you, Shannon. We're going to sign off now. And good luck to all of you as you move into learning and development space.
Thank you.